Welcome to the Purpose Driven Mom Show, episode 394. Today we're talking about my favorite topic, which is reading. We're not just going to talk about reading today. We're going to talk about why it's important you have a habit. How do you find time for a hobby that fills you up? And also why tracking is one of the things that makes it more fun. I'm going to talk about reading because it's my personal hobby, and I also know that I tend to attract a lot of readers to the community, to my programs and things like that. But as I'm talking today, if you're not a reader yet, I do want to encourage you to think about any hobby that you would be interested in adding into your day and how this system and what I'm going to teach today can help you with that. All right. So show notes are going to be over at purposedrivenmom.com/podcast 394. And we're going to start with why hobbies. I think as moms, it is very easy for us to do for others and not for ourselves. And so often we will go and go and go, not working on the things that we want to work on, but working on the things everyone needs from us. And so my encouragement is that you pick a hobby. And this could be anything. I'll have a lot of moms say, like, I don't know what hobby I want to have. I don't even know what I like. Explore, find an interest, find something you used to like as a kid and ask yourself, hey, how can I make this work as an adult? Is it something that still provides me with joy? For me, that's reading. I'll tell you a little of my reading story today and why I picked that as my main hobby. I have a couple hobbies that I work on, and it fills me up. I used to be an avid reader. When I was a kid, I loved reading. My mom would lovingly joke with me, I guess. I was single for a very long time, and she would say, well, Cara, no matter what, if you don't get married, it's okay. Like, you already have your books. And I was like, wait, what? It was just this, Cara loves her books. And for me, looking as an adult, looking back, I know what that was. My parents were divorced. I grew up in a home where there was a bit of fighting. I have some other trauma things that have happened. And for me, reading was an escape. Reading, especially fantasy, which was my preferred genre of choice, allowed me to go into a world where I didn't have to have stress. I didn't have to be Cara. I didn't have to perform. I didn't have to put on a happy face. I could just get lost in something else. And I think reading still does that for me. And so I read avidly most of my life. And then I had kids. And something happened for me right before that. I got really into personal growth. And again, I wrote a personal development book. So I'm nothing against, no shade on that genre. But I was very immersed in the personal development world. And it felt like fiction to me was frivolous. And it wasn't that anyone said that, but it was just this undertone of like, you should always be improving on yourself and you should always be doing more. You know what I'm talking about, right? And it felt like if I read fiction, then I was not maximizing my productivity, all right, in a way that would enhance my life. And that was honestly the productivity I grew up with. That's why I made the 50-minute formula. That's why I made SOAR. That's why I teach what I teach. Because for so many of us in society, especially as women, as moms, that's what we're taught, right? Like everything has to have a purpose. And I stopped reading because I thought I didn't have time for this. It doesn't really have a purpose in my life. There's no end goal. It's not, quote, productive. And then right after my son was born, maybe a year later, I was struggling with postpartum depression and anxiety during that time with him. And I felt really lost. I felt really alone. And I wanted to find something again. And so I posted a post on Facebook and was like, I want to get back into reading. Can somebody give me a book recommendation? And it kind of spiraled from there. I then went and got a job at a Barnes & Noble. Part of my story, if you're new here and you don't know it, my husband's out of work a few times in our 10 years of marriage, but the time that was the worst was almost a full entire year. I had just started my business. I was dealing with the postpartum depression from my youngest and from having my youngest, not like he called, but from having my youngest, I'll say it that way. And we needed something. And so I got a job as a bookseller, working minimum wage at the Barnes & Noble. And it honestly was one of the best things that I think happened because it also continued to reignite my love for books. It reminded me how much I love that. And I got to be around other people that enjoyed books. And it really lit this fire under me to continue reading. So since then, 2018, 2019, I've made reading goals on Goodreads every year. I continue to push myself and read. And I got back into, in 2020, 2021, I got back into fantasy, which is my favorite genre. But I told myself, I'm a grown-up now. Shouldn't be reading about dragons and fairies. Like, and I laughed today. If you're watching on YouTube, I've got my Valaris sweatshirt on. If anyone else reads Yakatar or any of those types of books. Now I fully am immersed in it. I bought myself some like fake fairy ears to wear to an event that I'm going to. I have gotten my friends involved, and I realized that life is too short to always be so serious. And also, fantasy is amazing. So I share all this to say that maybe you've had some hesitations of picking up books if that's your chosen hobby, and I want to encourage you that you deserve to have that time. Now, again, I mentioned, like, think of it like any hobby that you want to have. I just encourage you to come up with a hobby that lights you up, that you get excited about, that you want to work on. I'm running right now, right? And I'm training for a couple races. I say races in the most loose way possible. I'm not trying to win nothing. I'm trying to finish. But I've started running again. And I'm in these runner groups for slow runners because I am a slow runner. I run like a 13, 14-minute mile. And somebody in there was saying the other day how they were struggling. They're like, I don't enjoy this. How do you make it fun? And someone commented on the post and said, no offense, but like, if it isn't fun, why are you doing it? Right? Like, if the end goal is movement, why choose running if it's not enjoyable? Now, running is very challenging for me. I don't always want to do it, but I enjoy it enough to continue. Okay, so it's not saying it has to feel great all the time, but I say this when it comes to a hobby. I want you to find something that feels good, something that lights you up, something that makes you feel inspired, and something for you. Moms, please, please give yourself something for you that is not checking it off a to-do list, that is not for everyone else. And I'm going to say this with the caveat that I'm going to now teach you how to break down your reading goals. And you're like, but Cara, you said it didn't have to be like that formulaic. It doesn't. But here's why I create reading goals and use my 5-step goal process on them. Because if I don't make a plan, my entire theme of everything I teach and how I live my life is intentionality and grace. Making a plan, allowing myself to be human along the way. That's what I teach people, right? Because it's so anti-shame. It's showing up for how you want to show up. So if I don't make a plan around my reading goals, if I don't break my books down in the way that I'm going to tell you today, well, it's not going to happen. It's easier for me without a plan to say, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll just do it another day. I'll catch up on the weekend. But when I have an intentional plan, it doesn't take the fun, quote, people have messaged me a couple times on social media, like, take the fun out of it. Like, it is not taking the fun out of it, especially for me, because I love goal setting and checking off boxes. It lets me stay focused so I can hit the goals that matter to me. So the first thing I do recommend is if you want to make a reading goal, make one. If this is your first year getting back into reading, I would say don't make a reading goal. Like, don't make I want to read 12 books this year reading goal. Right. I started with that 12 books, and then I went to 24, then I jumped to 52. Last year I read 75, right? And they were big, and I reread a lot, and I was really proud of myself. And I do have a reading goal for this year, but for me, it's not it. I don't care if I hit my reading goal. What I care about is, am I continually reading because it's something I enjoy to do, right? Am I doing something that brings me joy? But I still break it down and track it. So here's how we do it. Ask yourself, not a full goal, but like, I want to finish this book. Okay. When do you want to finish it by? Now, my reading goal, I've read in January, I read 9 books, which is, I've never done that before. I was like, holy moly. And one of them, granted, maybe 8.5. One of them I started in December and only read like the last 200 pages in January. Because it was like a thicker fantasy book. But I'm going to count it. Right. Say to yourself, when do I want this book finished? This one book that I'm going to work on. All right. We're going to talk about parallel reading in a second, but when do I want this thing finished? Again, I use this exact same concept for my latch hook hobby. I like to make latch hook pillows. And so I've been using the same concept for it. Like, when do I want it finished? The reason we do that is because it gives us self-appointed urgency. A lot of times when we have external urgency, external deadlines, right? This is due for this person. I have to hand this in at work. This is due this day at school, etc. We do that. But when it comes to things that are for us, we often don't do. So I do recommend you give a deadline. I want to finish this book, we'll say by the end of the month. All right, we'll start with one book. Once we do that, I highly recommend a reading breakdown. I will never tell you to do anything 7 days a week. I'm a 5-day, sounds good enough, 6 days if you feel like it. 7 is setting yourself up for failure because you're going to have a day, it doesn't happen, and then you're going to feel like a failure. So I would rather see you start small. So say you want to read your book by the end of the month, you're going to ask yourself, how many days per week do I want to do this? All right, maybe it's 3 days, maybe it's 5 days, whatever it is. And then you're going to do what we call the numerical goal process, and you're going to math it out. So you're going to say, if this book, let's say, is 200 pages and you're going to read 5 days a week, so 5 times, say, on average 4 days in a month, right, is 20. 200 divided by 20 says I need to read 10 pages 5 days a week in order to get there. What this does is it allows our brains to go from look at this big book to I can do 10 pages, right? 10 pages might take 15, 20 minutes. I can get that done. I can squeeze that in. I can do that while I'm waiting for my kid at practice. I can do that in the car line. I can do that right before bed. I used to read when my kids were littler. I would put them up to bed. Now they're old enough that like we can put them up to bed and I can go right downstairs. But I used to sit on the stairs. I don't know if anyone else did this, but like my kids would want me to sit on the stairs in the hallway while they like fell asleep. So I would, and I say this in quotes, sorry. If you're watching on YouTube, you see my quotes. If you're on the podcast, come hang out on our YouTube channel where you can watch me, watch me teach these things. But I would sit in the hallway. And one of the things I would do is read because I'm sitting in the hallway anyway. And my options became, hey, I could scroll my phone, or I have the Kindle app, which is free on your phone. You don't have to have Kindle Unlimited to have the Kindle app. So I would sit on the Kindle app or the library app or whatever it was on my phone. This is before I had a Kindle, and I would read my book in the hallway, just 10 minutes, right? And I think that when you start small like that, I'm just going to read for 10 minutes, it allows you to get the momentum going. Now, I use that in the opposite way right now. I'm not even going to lie. The day that I'm recording this, a brand new book came out in my series. I took the day off yesterday to start reading it today. I'm getting back to work, but I told myself, if you're on YouTube, you can see it. I made myself a little chart and it says, read, podcast episode, read, podcast episode, read. Like I am using reading as an incentive for me to get some work done. So we can use it in the opposite way, right? I'll read for 20 minutes. I can get back to work. I can read for 20 minutes. I can get back to work. And sometimes it's, I only have these 10 minutes to read. I'm going to do it. So I recommend you do a breakdown for your book. That way you can stay focused. And if you get off track, if you get behind, say I'm reading another book right now that I'm off track on. I now can readjust and audit my goals each week. The other recommendation, if you're not going to do one of the other reasons I can read multiple books in a month like that is because I do a parallel reading method for different genres. I cannot read personally I have to read one fiction book at a time. I struggle to like toggle between fiction books because I'm like, who is the character? What is this world, etc. But I can read different genres or different modalities. And that allows me to do a parallel reading. So what I tend to do is read multiple books at one time. So right now I'm currently reading 2 books, about to start a third at one time. And here's how I do it. One of my books is always my personal growth book. I read this in the mornings. I drop my kids off. I come home while I'm having my coffee in the morning. I read for 10 minutes, and that's just some sort of personal growth. I just finished a book on productivity. I'm now reading a book on parenting. I just will read those 10 minutes at a time. It takes me a little bit of time, but I'm slowly doing them. Then what I can do is also listen to an audiobook. I can listen to an audiobook because it's just a different input for my brain. And so I will do an audiobook typically of something nonfiction or self-help. I struggle personally to listen to fiction audiobooks. My friends keep telling me like, go for it. But for me, the way my brain processes reading, when I'm doing an audiobook, if I've never read the book before, if it's something I've read, I can do it. But if I've never read it before, my brain has to like imagine what's happening. And then my brain makes the words in my brain of what they're saying. And then I picture it. And I'm like, well, that just feels like extra work when I could just look at the words and picture it in my head. So I don't like to do fiction on audio, but I know so many people do. And by the way, it counts as reading. It is a book. You're doing a good job. So I will go through then and I will do an audiobook that is maybe more nonfiction-y. Things like that, like another self-help book. Those I listen to maybe in the car. Right now, I'm not listening to an audiobook because I was like binging a podcast. So I kind of toggle back and forth. And then I read a fiction book. This allows me to read multiple books. So I might finish one fiction book a week or 10 days or in 5 days, but it takes me all month to read my nonfiction. And I'm okay with that. All right. So I want to encourage you, however you want to read, make it fit. If you're in the car a lot, I know I have a friend, I don't know if she listens to my podcast actually, but she is at work and she is permitted, I guess, or she just does it to listen to her audiobooks. And so all day long, she's able to listen to an audiobook. I don't have that time, but if you do, use it how you have it. Okay. Now, I mentioned a little bit about like when to read, but I want to talk now just about why tracking your reading is a really good way to stay on your goals. Now, there's a couple apps that you can use to track. Goodreads is probably the most popular. I like Goodreads because everyone's on Goodreads and they have the challenges and stuff. It syncs to your Kindle, things like that. Last year, I also used Storygraph, which I liked. I tried that one. And then I saw this on TikTok was Bookmori. And I saw it because, hold on, let me see if I can pull it up. Since if you're on YouTube, you can see it. with me. What I liked about Bookmori, and again, this was another free app, is they had a calendar. And I'm sure some of the other apps might have it too, but I can kind of flip it here. You can see on YouTube, here's my calendar. These are all the books I've read this month. There's a couple days, almost every day, where I've read 2 books, right? Like 2 books at a time, because I mentioned my parallel reading strategy. And then there's been 3 days where I'm only reading 1 book, like I'm in between books and I just haven't picked up the other one. But I kind of like this calendar. I think it's really cute. So I started to use Bookmore. But the other thing I want to show you though is making yourself your own reading journal. And I was so excited this year because I've been mentioning that I've gotten to get some printables up in the shop. Start something different for tracking, because tracking is so important. Tracking allows me to check in on my progress, applaud myself. Every time I track something, I'm like, you did this, good job, like positive affirmations, rewire my brain. And I decided to make a reading journal. If you haven't seen it, you can go to apurposedrivenmom.com/reading journal, or go to apurposedrivenmom.com/store. That's our store. We have all of our new printables, or just scroll into the show notes. We'll have it linked up. But if you're on YouTube, I'm going to show you it. If you're on the podcast, I'm going to talk you through what it looks like. And I'm going to tell you my rationale behind each of the pages and why I did them, and how you can start to incorporate tracking, whether you grab this or not, right? Like whether you go buy this journal or not, $17, feel free to go get it, or, or not. I want to talk to you and start to spark ideas of how you can start journaling your reading. Let me pull it up. All right, this is the reading journal and tracker that I made, honestly, for myself, and then we put it up in the shop. We've had over 100 and something people already purchase it. This is a printable, so you don't get anything in the mail. What I did was print mine out, and I'm going to put it inside of one of those folders that has the prongs. I'm left-handed, so I don't like binders because they hurt my arm, but I wanted to physically be able to track stuff. Now, there's a lot of different types of trackers in here, and the reason I did that was because tracking isn't one size fits all. I want you to pick the kind of stuff that you like and that works for you. So there's a couple things in here. One is these really cute prints that I made with some watercolor flowers. I got to hang mine up today and put them in my background just to kind of make your own little reading nook. I read wherever, but if you want to make something by your bookshelf and things like that, there's some reading prints in there, which I think just, they gamify the experience. They make it fun. I've got reading goal sheets. So what's different about my reading goal sheets is they're broken into the quarterly goals that I think are so important for everyone to have. Again, you don't have to I'm going to read 50 books in a year, but it is important to have an aim. Where do you want to go? So there's a couple of reading goal sheets, and then there's lists of books you want to read. I don't know how many times people tell me books. There's a couple options, a book wish list, books to buy, things like that. So there's a few options here, a section for new book releases, and then the reading logs, which are really fun. If you are maybe bullet journaling, you can cut these out, put them inside your bullet journal, give yourself some 5 stars on it. If you liked it, remind yourself a little bit about it. There's also these 1-sheet book reflections and book journals for you as well as, people like to print out the pictures, currently reading, things like that. I'm going to tell you personally, I'm using mostly the trackers, but I know that people really like these journals and logs, so I included them. And this is the cool thing about, I think, tracking and reading and printables, is you can pick what works for you. So if you wanted to create some sort of binder with your reads, you could. There's also what I love. This is my favorite one. This is the reading plan. This is where you break down what books you're reading, when you're going to be reading, which is important, and then which pages you'll be reading per session. And that's the thing I talked about, right? 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there. It gives you intentionality. We've got a couple pages for challenges here based on different genres, 10 books, 50, 100, 200. You can see, again, if you're on the YouTube, different ways to track the different books that you like here. I like this one a lot, of like just the stars, when did you read it, things like that. This one's a really cool one. It is a reading tracker. There's 2 versions, one with colors, one without, where you can kind of track if you read, when, which version of reading that you did, and set some goals. And then also we've got a weekly reading tracker. So as you see, when you're tracking, there's no one size fits all. Okay. It's whatever modality works for you. If we like these little color ones, I love these little boxes. This one is my favorite one that I'm using. It's just tracking how many days this month I read. So far, I've read every day this month, but also remember, I'm reading multiple books. So maybe I only get my 10 minutes of my personal growth book in. Some days I only am reading my fiction, but it's all reading, so it counts. And again, different varieties of did I read this month. This one's set up for the months, which I like. And again, I think when you have different ways to look at things, it allows you to make what fits your brain and your style work. Again, weekly, monthly reading logs, things like that, A to Z reading challenges, a reading bingo, and some more, cute little quotes and things like that with some note pages. So I wanted to show you this printable. Again, you can go to our YouTube channel, which is linked up over in the show notes, or go to a purposedrivenmom.com/podcast394. It's got everything there. And the link will be below if you want to snag this reading journal. But today I just want to encourage you that whatever hobby you choose to pick up, you deserve that time for yourself. You can allow it to be fun. You can allow it to be light. You can allow it to be easy. And there's nothing wrong with tracking as you go to help push you towards actually completing the goal. If you have any questions, or if you get your reading journal, tag me on Instagram at a purpose driven mom. I would love to see that you're enjoying it. Have a wonderful rest of your day.